How you doing, everybody? This is Rashad again with the Black Guys Guide to Movies. First of three reviews tonight. The first film that I'm actually going to be reviewing tonight is a Spanish 1999 horror film called The Nameless. Let me start off by saying that I had never heard of this film. It's funny, we here over in North America and specifically America sometimes don't get a chance to really appreciate or understand that there are other films that are made outside of this continent and they're worthy of our attention. Let me start off by saying that it had a really good premise. The execution was good for about 3/4 of the film, and in the last 15 minutes, this film pretty much fell apart. That's what made it most disappointing more than anything. It was based on how ambitious it was. It really didn't know how to tie up the loose ends really well. I don't know if it was a case of trying to be too ambitious or trying to come to the ending that satisfied everybody, but I think before the last 20 minutes when characters were doing the smart things, suddenly things happened where characters revolved, almost went back to that caricature of typical horror movie bullshit. But that being said, I want to give a fair and honest review. Let me start off by saying that the plot of the film itself was very interesting. It was about a married couple that loses their 7-year-old, 6-year-old daughter to a brutal murder. Her charred body was found at the beginning in some sort of water shaft or sewer system. Her body was identified by the coroner's office and the police officers, and the parents are informed. And unfortunately, due to their daughter dying, the marriage fell apart. And so now the mother is actually having to cope by herself with the death of her daughter. Now, some years later, she receives a phone call from a voice that sounds like her daughter's, saying that, "Mom, it's me, I'm still alive." And obviously she has very large reservations about the fact that this was her daughter. So after taking a couple more phone calls from the same individual claiming to be her daughter, she decides to actually go back to the same cop that told her that her daughter was dead. And what revolves around this is a classic case of whodunit. But what The Nameless did very well for 3/4 of the film was that it built tension really well. The characters acted like, I would never know the understanding of losing a child, but they acted like people. They were based on real circumstances. The emotions were real. The flashbacks of good times that she had with her daughter were very well done. She actually tries to start other relationships to try to move on, but it turns out that that's not a good, healthy thing for her based on the individual that she met. That was really well done. The cop is emotionally scarred, your classic emotionally scarred cop, but he had a heavy weight on his shoulders, and based on the weight that he was carrying, you really felt sympathy for him. So I thought that those things were really well written, very explored, and it almost seemed like the horror story portion of it was a backstory in a way that you weren't watching a horror film. But unfortunately, I don't know if somebody just decided they couldn't really know how to wrap this up or they didn't know how to proceed. They decided to start introducing some elements in the film that simply seemed like it didn't belong in the same movie. And that's what was most disappointing, because for the first 90 minutes of this 102-minute film, The Nameless is a taut thriller. There's a tabloid reporter in this film who actually understands, who actually follows and writes about different stories of missing kids, sort of like a National Enquirer. He's introduced into the film, and he plays a large portion of it as well. But if I get in too much into him, I'll probably give away a bunch of the plot. Let me just say that The Nameless, was one of those films that I give credit to the premise. I thought the acting was well done, and unless you are adamant about watching this film, the ending really, really just felt like it was rushed, and it didn't really make much sense. And when you really think about it, based on what you saw further, you have a hard time believing that the characters would suddenly start being that stupid. So because of the ending, this movie was a 3.5 do-rag film before I actually would have given this review, but it knocked it down to 2.5. So that's my review of 1999's The Nameless. If you got nothing else better to do on a Saturday night, worthy of it. But if you got any feedback for it, let me know. On to my second review, Lee Daniels, The Butler. Talk to you guys soon.